the Attorney General.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to contribute to this debate this afternoon. And I will regret that I will never aspire to rise to the level of histrionics that we have just witnessed. I have the honor and the privilege to follow the Minister of Finance, the Honourable Minister of Finance, in a very comprehensive piloting of this bill, so that my remarks are by way of endorsement in support of his comprehensive contribution and will be comparatively brief. We have the title of the bill before us. I don't think I need repeat it. And the Honourable Minister of Finance has taken us through each of the amendments proposed in the 11 pieces of legislation which are to be amended, and I therefore will not repeat the sections or dwell unduly on them. What I would like to do really is to speak to the global forum environment in which we find ourselves, because it is an appropriate way to describe it. The reality of the legislation that regulates our global forum compliance is that it is an international arena in which we have to be careful, we have to be scrupulous, and we have to be insistent on international compliance. International compliance, Madam Speaker, which reflects a recognition of shared values, mutual respect, and a commitment to addressing global challenges collectively. And this government, of which I am proud to be part, has the approach which not only is intended to enhance the country's standing in the international arena, but reinforce the role of a responsible and accountable global actor. So in speaking to this bill today, I don't think we want to be engaging in histrionics on states of emergency. Madam Speaker, in short, this critical piece of legislation is essential to the economic growth and development of this proud country and will resolve remaining legislative gaps identified in recommendations which have come from the Global Forum, from the OECD, while simultaneously addressing deficiencies observed by the Global Forum on transparency and the exchange of information for tax purposes. In order to do that, the legal framework must be put in place. Madam Speaker, by way of background, Global Forum provides a multilateral response to tackle offshore tax evasion. It brings together 168 jurisdictions, inclusive of Trinidad and Tobago, dedicated to improving transparency and exchange of information for tax purposes. Transparency being a concept which is alien to some, but which this government is committed to. The core function of the Global Forum is to monitor the implementation of the international standards on transparency and the exchange of information for tax purposes, and to review the effectiveness of their implementation in practice. Madam Speaker, we can reflect as we consider the responsibility of responsible government, and we listen to those on the other side. We can reflect and ask ourselves, as we hear the sound bells of opposition for the sake of opposition, we can reflect on the fact that even as the government attempts to pass legislation, all within the regime of tax improvement, we can reflect on the fact of the incessant opposition to the government's efforts. One can only, and it is not relevant to this debate, but I mention it immediately, one can only reflect on the insistent opposition to the implementation of the Revenue Authority. Madam Speaker, the first standard agreed and implemented under the Global Forum regime provides for the international exchange of information on request, known by the acronym EOIR, where a tax authority can request a particular piece of information to progress a tax information. The second provides for the International Automatic Exchange of Information, the acronym AEOI, where a predefined set of information on financial accounts held by non-residents is automatically exchanged each year. This exchange is underpinned by ensuring that the information is kept confidential, properly safeguarded, and particular requirements are placed on jurisdictions to ensure this. This is the area in which the Global Forum mandate operates to ensure that all jurisdictions that belong in a civilized world have to subscribe to a comprehensive, collected, shared exchange of information to encourage transparency and to avoid tax evasion. It involves, as the Minister of Finance, the Honourable Minister of Finance has told us, it involves the peer review process, monitoring implementation in relation to each of its members and non-members which are relevant to its work. This is to ensure that the standards are properly implemented and on the basis of a level playing field. The Global Forum, Madam Speaker, monitors the worldwide implementation of these standards, conducts peer reviews to ensure that the standards are implemented effectively. It serves as a forum for its members to discuss these issues and to deliver capacity building and technical assistance to members to support them in implementing the standards. The monitoring and peer review processes provide assurance to Global Forum members that all jurisdictions are properly implementing the standards, and they highlight where more needs to be done. This is the process in which we are currently engaged as we are here before this bill to ask this House to approve the bills to improve the legal framework in which those standards are to be implemented and to continue to be implemented and monitored. The Global Forum has an established peer review process in relation to the EOIR standard, which is already, Madam Speaker, in its second round. With respect to the newer AEIO standard, the Global Forum has already reviewed the domestic and international legal frameworks in place and the effectiveness of the implementation of the standards in practice, with results having been published at the end of 2022. It is now conducting in-depth reviews on the implementation in the practice of those standards. In light of the foregoing, Madam Speaker, members can be assured that the amendments which we seek to these key pieces of legislation before this House are necessary so as to comply with Trinidad and Tobago's obligations under the Global Forum. And, you know, background is relevant, Madam Speaker. I won't dwell unduly on it, but Hansard will tell us that on the 25th of May 2018, the Honourable Minister of Finance delivered a statement on the Global Forum and European Union requirements. And one of the things that he reminded us of is that in the period 2011 to 2015, nothing was done. And that is an important period. That is before this government took office. Nothing was done to get this country on the even level playing field so that it could meet the standards of compliance. And it is, among other reasons, why Trinidad and Tobago is now in a less than compliant rule, and we have to do the work and to appeal to members in this House for rational thought, rational debate, collective effort, shoulder to the wheel, to recognize that it is our responsibility to take our country forward in an international playing field where we continue to trade, we continue to do business, we are not a tax haven, we are not known for tax evasion, and we fulfill our international obligations on a responsible basis. Madam Speaker, Trinidad and Tobago's placement on the European Union's list of non-cooperative jurisdictions emanating from the failure of the previous government is as a result of the three criteria. One, the non-compliant rating by the Global Forum under the exchange of information on request, the automatic exchange of information and common report standards. Secondly, the Forum on harmful tax practices. And thirdly, the inclusive framework on base erosion and harmful tax practices. I was taken aback by the histrionics of the member for Naparima when he asked the question, what about the base erosion, when he was talking about Barbados? Well, he doesn't seem to know that this government, as late and as recently as the 24th of November 2023, placed the base erosion and profit shifting inclusive framework country by country reporting bill 2023 on the order paper in the other place where it is going to be debated, and it will be coming here. And it will be coming here. It is part of a process, but it is very easy, facile, to stand up, to jump up and down in one place, gesticulate, and throw blame without being responsible. Madam Speaker, the government of this country, led by the Ministry of Finance, and I pay tribute to the Honourable Minister of Finance, with support from the Tax Treaty Unit, the Board of Inland Revenue, and I don't need to repeat, the Honourable Minister has told us, with support from the Ministry of the Office of Attorney General, has established a high-level committee to address Trinidad and Tobago's placement on the EU list of non-cooperative tax jurisdictions. That committee continues to work in tandem with the European Commission and the Global Forum Secretariat by an extensive, intensive technical assistance towards a common goal of preparing the necessary legislative, administrative, and operational improvements to undergo its Phase 2 peer review in order to protect the integrity of the global financial system, inclusive of the EU financial system. Most recently, Madam Speaker, the Council of the European Union in October 17, 2023, added Antigua and Barbuda, Belize and Seychelles, together with Trinidad and Tobago, with a total of 16 other countries that are on the EU list of non-cooperative tax jurisdictions. The member for Naparima, to his credit, is able to point to the fact that some of our CARICOM counterparts have done the work to progress themselves, but the reality is that we are all shoulder to the wheel doing the work that needs to be done. So in that very publication of October 17th, 2023, not only is Trinidad and Tobago still on the list, but we are told Antigua and Barbuda, Anguilla, the Bahamas, Belize, Turks and Caicos Islands. The point is, it is a work in progress that we require national effort to undertake, and unfortunately, national effort is an alien concept to those on the other side. That report, the October 17, 2023 report, identified Trinidad's status as not having a rating of at least largely compliant, but tells us that Trinidad and Tobago has committed to addressing the Global Forum recommendations, and I'm quoting here, has committed to addressing the Global Forum recommendations with regard to the automatic exchange of information, criterion 1.1, in due time, so as to achieve determinations of at least in place but needs improvement on core requirements 1 and 2 in the Global Forum peer review report in the autumn of 2024. And that is where we are heading. And that is why we are here today to ask responsible legislators to accept that as part of this work in progress, we must continue to take this country forward for our children. Madam Speaker, there is currently a global concern about people not paying their taxes and moving illegal money across borders. And we in Trinidad and Tobago are taking every possible step to ensure and to secure Trinidad and Tobago's best position in this respect. The passage of this bill is therefore critically important and essential to the economic growth and development of Trinidad and Tobago, and to ensure that we are on par with other countries that are currently compliant with the Global Forum for Tax Reporting Requirements. The overarching goal is to improve domestic resource obligations, domestic resource mobilization, strengthening of our tax systems, and increasing government revenue. The Global Forum recently met, Madam Speaker, with the very high-level committee that has been established by the Minister of Finance on the 14th of December 2023 to provide further technical assistance in addressing compliance with their standards in order to review and finalize the Global Forum bill. The government continues to be committed to ensuring Trinidad and Tobago's international compliance with its international anti-money laundering, counter-finance terrorism, and proliferation obligations. In particular, this involves having available for scrutiny up-to-date and accurate beneficial ownership information with respect to all entities, companies, statutory bodies, partnerships, reporting entities, listed businesses, non-profit organizations, express trusts, and other legal arrangements. Beneficial ownership, Madam Speaker, transparency standards aim to make company ownership information available for inspection in order to eliminate the difficulty, if not the impossibility, of tracing assets and financial flows to the actual owner or person in control of the asset. In point of fact, the very bill that we are debating today is dedicated to that. I've mentioned the base erosion and profit sharing, profit shifting inclusive framework country by country reporting bill, which plays an important role to ensure fairness and equity in tax systems and to fortify the international tax frameworks in the face of new and changing business models. This global minimum tax framework under Pillar 2 is already a reality, with over 50 jurisdictions taking steps towards implementation. And we have placed that bill on the order paper in the other place at the 24th of November, and it will be debated, and it will come here, and it will be part of the collective package of integrated legislation designed to take this country forward, particularly in the areas of beneficial ownership. On the order paper today in this House, Bill number 5 on the order paper, the cross bill. It is known as the Miscellaneous Provisions Registrar General, Companies Registration of Business Names and Non-Profit Organizations Bill 2023. It's on the order paper today. It is listed to be debated when next we assemble, with your leave, Madam Speaker. And I anticipate that that bill will be shortly debated. And very importantly, and relevantly to the debate that we are engaged in here, that bill makes serious provisions for improving the beneficial ownership concept of ownership of companies. It introduces a threshold for the beneficial owner to include the natural person who ultimately owns or controls 10% or more of the shares or membership interests of the company through direct ownership, indirect ownership, or control through other means, and will be read once passed into law in tandem with the amendments that we are asking this House today to pass, so that in due course, from a holistic point of view, the amendments will all complement each other in the context and with the concept and intent of transparency of ownership. And may I take this opportunity, because very often when we get lost in the histrionics that we find ourselves being assailed by in this House, may I take this opportunity to pay special tribute to and to thank some of the very hard-working members of the Ministry of the Office of the Attorney General, and indeed the Ministry of Finance, persons who have been working very hard for the last year in ensuring. Today we have 11 pieces of legislation encompassing a suite of legislative amendments. That doesn't come about overnight. It comes about as a result of hard work. So may I, at the risk of being invidious and singling out persons, may I name in this House today and say thank you to Deputy Chief Parliamentary Counsel Ida Eversley, Senior Counsel, who has been very hard at work here. May I name and single out the Chair of the Anti-Terrorism Unit and NAMLAC, the National Anti-Money Laundering Control, Mrs. Viana Sharma of the Office of the Ministry of the Attorney General. And may I name 3 persons of the Ministry of Finance, with leave of the Minister of Finance, Mrs. Savitri Sipasad and Messrs. Jonathan Suhan and Dylan Tilak Singh, who have been hard at work for the last year to enable us to be here today to get engaged in serious business and to avoid the histrionics of states of emergency. And I thank them. This country must appreciate and must know and must recognize the hard work that goes behind the legislation that is passed in this House, that comes before this House in the form of the bills that we are debating today, the bills that are in the Senate, which will come to this House and together encompass the holistic approach to improving Trinidad and Tobago's global forum compliance. And while I'm on that, just to take a page very briefly out of the Minister of Finance's contribution, it is important, lest we get lost in distracting ourselves by things that are not important, to inform ourselves by the fact that there is a distinction between the Global Forum and the Financial Action Task Force. The requirement for promoting transparency and the exchange of information for tax purposes, Madam Speaker, is set out by the Global Forum standards. That's what we are debating here today. That should not be confused with the equally important Financial Action Task Force, FATF, and the methodology on anti-money laundering, counter-terrorism, and proliferation financing. Whilst the work of these 2 bodies complement each other, the distinction is important, given that tax evasion under the FATF standards can be a predicate offense for money laundering. Trinidad and Tobago, under this government, is committed to implementing those FATF standards as well, necessary in order to take the profit out of criminal activities and reduce this country's exposure to cross-border illicit flow of goods or funds. The end goal, and I emphasize that, that is what we are here about. In Global Forum for Tax Evasion and in the FATF engagements, to ensure that the end goal is to protect the international, regional, and domestic financial system. Madam Speaker, in conclusion, I want to emphasize that this country, by the bills that are before this Parliament today, continues to demonstrate a willingness and a commitment in order to ensure that the country's international compliance with the European Union's work to fight tax evasion and avoidance is well on the way. This commitment is evident in the very reason we are here today in this House, and I thank you.
For Orbuch West.